tying up a little dry fly today. This is a fly called the John Storey. Now, it's an interesting little history about this. I had a follower, this isn't the history that's interesting, it's the history of the fly, but I had a follower reach out to me about this particular fly, the John Storey fly. What is known as the John Storey fly these days is this version of it, which is a dry fly version. The original fly was a wet fly. A lot of people have, speculated in terms of how this came about. The original version was tied by John Storey and created a long time ago, but his grandson apparently was tying them to continue producing them and had a difficult time with the wing on the wet fly. So he ended up just tying it this way, and it ended up as a dry fly. So that's what's most known. If you talk to somebody about the John Storey fly, you're mostly talking about the dry fly version, which is still produced and is still a very, very productive fly today. However, I was asked to do a little research and to find out how this kind of came about in comparison to the wet fly. So the wet fly is going to be done in another video that'll be out in a few days. This one is going to be just the dry fly version. And I'll talk a little bit about that, the wet fly version during the video. But if you want to see the wet fly version and understand how this came about, I think, then look for that video. So that's the John Storey Dry Fly. I'll get started tying. I'm going to start the John Storey Dry Fly with my hook and the vise. This is a Mustad R50 98. Can't remember the original numbers, a 94 840, something like that, but it's an R50. It's a standard dry fly hook. You could do a little bit longer shanked hook on this if you want. This is a size 12. I'll go ahead and debarb the hook. For thread, I'm using a Danville 70 Denier in black. This is a Peacock Herl body. I'm going to attach my thread just right behind the eye of the hook a little bit and just advance it down maybe the length of the eye. And this is where I'm going to tie in the what would be a wing on this, because the John Storey Dry Fly is kind of like a little parachute or a merger, in that I'll show you one here. The wing on it is not folded back. It's out the front here with the hackle collared around it. So it's going to kind of ride in the water like this, kind of like, a parachute dry fly would. So for lack of a better term, I'm going to call that the wing. And that is just some Mallard flank. You want to try and find one that has some fairly even tips. What we're going to do is we're going to tie this on here. I don't quite need that much of it, so I'm going to take away a little bit more on each side, just a few. Peel those away. I find the easiest way to do this, you could, if you have a larger feather, say if you had a nice large Mallard flank, you could just take some of the barbs right from the side, collect those as kind of a post and tie those in. But I tie these in like this, and you'll notice that I am back from behind the eye, and I'll put 3 wraps in, because then I'm going to pull this forward to my left, drawing all those barbs in under those thread wraps. I'm only putting in 3 because I don't want it to be too tight. If it's too tight, I end up pulling it down the hook shank. And I want to pull that in, so I create a post that's off the front behind the eye here that is going to be about a shank length long. So keep that in mind. Your thread is actually a little bit behind the eye. So don't do this from the thread here to the end as shank length, because what you really need is from right behind the eye here to be about a shank length. I'm going to go with that, and this way I can collect this, and keeping it on top, I'm going to wrap down behind the eye, leaving just maybe one wrap of space behind there, because when we finish this, we're going to finish it by pulling this up and putting just a little whip finish right under there. So with that post secured, you could also, if you wanted, have this just a little bit longer if you wanted to. With the post secured, I'm going to put a little bit more wax on my thread. I'm going to advance my thread down to just past the point of the hook, and now I'm going to tie in the Peacock Herl. I'm just using some regular Peacock Herl. I've got just 2 strands for this. If you want a little bit thicker body, or if it's a larger size hook, you could go with 3, 4 strands. As you'll see when I do the video for the wet fly, it's on a larger hook. But I'm going to tie these in. I don't need a whole lot, so I'm going to tie these in instead of right at the very tip here. I'm going to tie them in back a little bit. That way I get a little bit fuller body. Advance my thread forward about halfway up the body. Then I'm going to trim away the excess. A little bit more forward, because that's going to give me the space for my hackle. Then I'm going to wrap the Peacock Herl in. Go a little bit further back on the hook shank if you want a little bit longer body. Get that Herl wrapped in and secured. And then the last bit of material is going to be a hackle. For this, because this is a dry fly, I'm going to use, this is a dry fly neck whiting. I think it's a pro grade, just a brown neck. I want the barbs to be a little bit longer, maybe 1.5 times the gap. Just because, again, this is going to ride in the water. It's kind of a parachute fly. So I want a little bit wider collar to help support the whole thing. You'll notice that I've cut the barbs here at the bottom, so this helps as an anchor, but I also stripped some off the rachis. And the reason for that is, as I tie this in and secure it and advance my thread forward, when I start to wrap this hackle in, having that bare spot on the rachis helps, because I don't have the barbs on this. Notice there aren't any that are already sticking out towards the back. As I wrap this in, they all come out nice and perpendicular to the hook. I'm going to get 4 or 5 wraps in here. You could put a little bit more if you want. I'll leave just a little bit of space. This is the most difficult part about this fly, not necessarily difficult, but is getting this hackle in, and then in a moment securing it so that we're not wrapping in that post and the hackles. We don't want to wrap those down, although I don't think it's really, if you get some of those trapped under there, trim them back, but I don't think it's really interesting. Yeah, see, like that right there, I had it, everything was fine until doing my whip finish there, it grabbed a few of the hackles. So if that happens, you can just trim those back. You could also just leave them. I think the fly would probably fish just as well. I don't think the fish are really going to care that much. So a little bit of head cement on here, just right on the sides there to soak down in those thread wraps. Seal that up a little bit. That is the John Storey Dry Fly. As I mentioned in the introduction, the original was a wet fly, and that's what I'm going to do in the next video, is the wet fly, and I'm going to talk then about how it is that I think the dry fly came about. But these days, I only saw one or maybe two videos on even doing the wet fly. Most of them are all on the dry flies, but it is still a very, very popular and very productive dry fly to this day. So that's the John Storey Dry Fly. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. And what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.